I stared at the divorce papers in my hands, the weight of them far heavier than the few sheets of paper they actually were. My husband Devon's words echoed in my ears, each syllable a dagger to my heart. "You've always been a burden," he said, his voice as cold as the February wind howling outside our bedroom window. "Now that you can't give me children, I'm done with you." I looked up at him, searching for any hint of the man I'd fallen in love with 15 years ago. All I saw was a stranger, his face twisted with disdain. "Devon, please," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "I'm having surgery tomorrow. They don't know if it's cancer yet. How can you do this now?" He scoffed, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. "That's exactly why I'm doing this now, Evie. I can't be tied to a sick wife. What about my future? My legacy?" The room spun around me, and I gripped the edge of the bed to steady myself. "Your legacy? What about our vows? In sickness and in health, remember?" Devon's laugh was bitter. "Wake up, Evie. Those were just words. This is real life." A knock at the door interrupted us. "Everything all right in there?" It was Miriam, Devon's mother. Of course she was hovering nearby, probably gleeful at the thought of finally getting rid of me. "It's fine, Mother," Devon called out. He turned back to me, his eyes cold. "Sign the papers, Evie. Make this easy on both of us." I felt like I was drowning, gasping for air in a sea of betrayal. "Both of us? You mean easy for you, don't you?" He shrugged, not even bothering to deny it. "Think about it. You've never fit in here. My parents have always seen you as less than. This is your chance for a clean break." The truth of his words stung, but I couldn't deny them. Memories of snide comments, backhanded compliments, and cold shoulders from Miriam and Stanley flashed through my mind. I'd endured it all, thinking Devon was worth it. How wrong I'd been. "I need time to think," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. Devon's eyes narrowed. "You have until morning. I want those papers signed before you leave for the hospital." With that, he turned and left the room, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the damning papers. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at nothing. The buzz of my phone finally broke through my daze. It was my mother, Henrietta. "Evie? Sweetheart, are you there?" I cleared my throat, trying to keep my voice steady. "Hi, Mom." "Oh, honey, you sound terrible. What's wrong?" The dam broke. Through sobs, I told her everything. The papers, Devon's cruel words, the impending surgery. She listened, her fury growing with each word. "You've been nothing but a maid to them," she said, her voice laced with anger. "I knew that boy was no good, but this is beyond the pale." "Mom, I don't know what to do," I admitted, feeling lost. "You listen to me, Evelyn Harper," she said, her tone brooking no argument. "You are strong. You are brave, and you do not need that sorry excuse for a man or his horrible parents. Your father and I are on our way. We'll be there first thing in the morning to take you to the hospital." I felt a small spark of warmth in my chest. "Thanks, Mom." After we hung up, I looked at the divorce papers again. Part of me wanted to rip them to shreds, to fight for the life I thought I had. But a smaller, growing part whispered that maybe this was an opportunity, a chance to reclaim myself. With a shaky hand, I reached for a pen. As I signed my name, I made a silent vow. I would get through this surgery. I would survive. And I would build a life so beautiful, so full of love and joy, that Devon and his family would regret ever letting me go. I placed the signed papers on Devon's pillow and lay down, closing my eyes. Tomorrow would bring challenges, pain, and uncertainty. But for the first time in years, it would also bring the promise of freedom. The harsh fluorescent lights of the hospital waiting room made everything look sickly and unreal. I sat between my parents, their presence a comforting shield against the storm of emotions threatening to overwhelm me. "Evelyn Harper?" A nurse called out, her voice cutting through the quiet murmur of the room. I stood on shaky legs, my mother's hand firmly grasping mine. "That's me." As we followed the nurse, my father's deep voice rumbled behind us. "We're right here with you, sweetheart. You're not alone." Those words, so simple yet so powerful, nearly broke me. I blinked back tears, determined to stay strong. The pre-op room was cold, both in temperature and atmosphere. As I changed into the thin hospital gown, my mind drifted back to the countless times I'd felt just as exposed and vulnerable in my own home. "Remember when you first moved in with Devon and his parents?" My mother's voice pulled me from my thoughts. I should have spoken up then. I sighed, settling onto the narrow bed. Mom, please, not now. But Henrietta Harper was not one to be silenced. No, Evie, you need to hear this. You've been nothing but a maid to them. All these years, cooking, cleaning, trying to please those people who never appreciated you. Her words unleashed a flood of memories. Miriam's critical eyes following my every move as I dusted her precious antiques. Stanley's dismissive grunt when I'd served dinner, no matter how perfectly prepared. And Devon, always siding with his parents, never standing up for me. I thought if I just tried harder, they'd accept me, I whispered, the truth of it hitting me anew. My father's hand on my shoulder startled me. You shouldn't have had to try at all, honey. A real family loves you for who you are. A knock at the door interrupted us. Dr. Patel entered, her kind eyes crinkling as she smiled. Ready, Evelyn? I took a deep breath. As I'll ever be. As they wheeled me towards the operating room, a commotion in the hallway caught my attention. My heart lurched as I recognized Devon's voice. I'm her husband. I have a right to be here. Dr. Patel frowned. Is there a problem, Evelyn? I closed my eyes, steeling myself. That man is not my husband anymore. Please don't let him in. The doctor nodded, signaling to a nearby security guard. As they pushed me through the double doors, I caught a glimpse of Devon's face, a mix of anger and something else. Regret, perhaps? The anesthesia began to take effect, and as I drifted off, I found myself hoping. Not for reconciliation, but for the strength to finally break free. When I woke, groggy and sore, my parents were there, their faces a mix of relief and concern. How did it go? I croaked, my throat dry. My mother's eyes welled up. Dr. Patel said they got it all, sweetheart. No cancer. The relief was overwhelming, but as I fully regained consciousness, so did the memories of everything else. Devon? I asked, almost afraid to hear the answer. My father's face hardened. Gone. Security escorted him out, but Evie, his mother, is here. She's demanding to see you. I felt a flash of panic, quickly replaced by a surge of anger. After everything they'd put me through, they still thought they had the right to be here? Tell her to leave, I said, my voice stronger than I expected. I don't want to see any of them ever again. My mother squeezed my hand. That's my girl. As my parents left to deal with Miriam, I lay back, staring at the ceiling. The physical battle might be over, but I knew the emotional one was just beginning. For the first time in years, though, I felt a glimmer of hope. I was alive, cancer-free, and finally free from the shackles of a loveless marriage. Whatever came next, I would face it on my own terms. No more trying to please people who could never be satisfied. No more sacrificing my happiness for others. It was time to rediscover who Evelyn Harper really was beyond being Devon's wife or Miriam and Stanley's daughter-in-law. As I drifted off to sleep again, I made a silent promise to myself. This was my second chance at life, and I wouldn't waste it. The gentle hum of my parents' house wrapped around me like a warm blanket. After weeks in the sterile hospital environment, being here felt like a breath of fresh air. But as I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the stack of bills before me, that comfort quickly evaporated. You don't need him, Evie. You have us, my father, Paul, said, squeezing my hand. His weathered face creased with concern. I managed a weak smile. I know, Dad, but I can't keep relying on you and Mom forever. These medical bills, they're astronomical. My mother, Henrietta, bustled in with a steaming mug of tea. Nonsense, sweetheart. We're your parents. This is what we're here for. As grateful as I was, a familiar feeling of inadequacy crept in. I was 35, divorced, and living with my parents. This wasn't how I'd imagined my life would turn out. I need to get back to work, I declared, more to myself than to them. My mother's brow furrowed. Evie, you're still recovering. There's no rush. A sharp knock at the door cut her off. We exchanged puzzled glances. We weren't expecting anyone. My father went to answer it, and I heard muffled voices. Then, Evie, it's for you. Curious, I made my way to the door. My heart dropped when I saw who was standing there. Miriam Caldwell, my former mother-in-law, looked smaller than I remembered. Her usually impeccable appearance was slightly disheveled, and her eyes were red-rimmed. Evelyn, she said, her voice wavering. May I come in? Every instinct screamed at me to slam the door in her face, but something in her demeanor made me hesitate. 5 minutes, I said coldly, stepping aside. We settled in the living room, an uncomfortable silence stretching between us. My parents hovered nearby, ready to intervene if needed. Miriam cleared her throat. I owe you an apology, Evelyn. The way we treated you, it was unforgivable. I stared at her, speechless. In all the years I'd known her, I'd never heard Miriam apologize for anything. She continued, her voice thick with emotion. Devin told us what he did, how he left you when you needed him most. I'm ashamed of him, and I'm ashamed of myself for raising a son who could be so cruel. Part of me wanted to lash out, to unleash years of pent-up hurt and anger. But looking at this broken woman before me, I felt an unexpected twinge of pity. Why are you telling me this now? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Miriam's eyes met mine, because I realized how wrong we were, and because I need your help. I let out a bitter laugh. My help? After everything you put me through? It's Stanley, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. He's sick, cancer. The doctors say it's advanced. The irony wasn't lost on me. The man who had made my life miserable for years was now facing the very thing I had just overcome. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, surprised to find I meant it, but I don't see how I can help. Miriam wrung her hands. You're the strongest person I know, Evelyn. The way you've handled everything, I thought maybe you could talk to him. Help him find the courage to fight. I sat there, stunned. The woman who had once told me I wasn't good enough for her son was now calling me strong. Asking for my help, my mother's voice cut through my thoughts. I think you should leave now, Miriam. Evie needs her rest. As my father showed Miriam out, I remained rooted to the spot, my mind whirling. Part of me wanted to help, to be the bigger person. But another part, a louder part, screamed that I owed these people nothing. What are you thinking, sweetheart? My mother asked gently. I looked up at her, feeling more conflicted than ever. I don't know, Mom. I really don't know. As I headed to my room, my father's words echoed in my head. You don't need him, Evie. You have us. He was right. I had their love and support. But now I faced a choice that would test the limits of my compassion and my newfound strength. Could I find it in myself to help the very people who had hurt me so deeply? Or was it time to finally, truly move on? The familiar hum of the office felt both comforting and strange as I stepped off the elevator. It had been months since I'd last been here, yet it felt like a lifetime ago. Evie. Fiona's excited voice cut through the quiet buzz of the morning. She rushed over, enveloping me in a warm hug. You look great, stronger than ever. I smiled, grateful for her enthusiasm. Thanks, Fee. It's good to be back. As we walked to my desk, I couldn't help but notice the sidelong glances and hushed whispers from my coworkers. News of my divorce and health struggles had clearly made the rounds. Don't mind them, Fiona said, sensing my discomfort. They're just glad you're okay. I nodded, trying to shake off the feeling of being under a microscope. So, what have I missed? Fiona's face lit up. Oh, you won't believe it. Remember that big account we were trying to land before you left? Well, as she filled me in on office gossip and project updates, I felt a sense of normalcy returning. This was my world where I was valued for my skills and contributions, not judged by my ability to please a demanding husband and in-laws. But that feeling was short-lived. As I settled into my chair, my boss, Mr. Thornton, appeared at my desk. Evelyn, a word in my office, please. Fiona shot me a concerned look as I followed him. Once inside, he gestured for me to sit. First, let me say how glad we are to have you back, he began, his tone oddly formal. However, there have been some changes while you were away. My stomach dropped. Changes? He cleared his throat. We've had to reassign some of your major accounts. Given your extended absence and the uncertain nature of your return, it was necessary for the company's stability. I felt the floor shift beneath me. Those accounts had been mine for years. I'd built relationships, nurtured deals, poured my heart into them. But, sir, I'm back now. Surely I can. He held up a hand. I'm afraid the decisions have been made. We'll be easing you back in with smaller projects for now. As I left his office, my mind reeled. It felt like another betrayal, another piece of my identity stripped away. Fiona was waiting, her face etched with concern. What happened? I shook my head, unable to form words. She guided me to the break room, away from prying eyes. They took my accounts, I finally managed, my voice barely above a whisper. Fiona's eyes widened. All of them? But that's not fair. You've been through hell, Evie. They can't punish you for that. Her indignation sparked something in me. She was right. I'd fought cancer, survived a divorce, and reclaimed my life. I wouldn't let this setback define me. You know what? I said, straightening my spine. I'm going to prove to them that I'm still the best they've got. Fiona grinned. That's the Evie I know, and I've got just the thing to help. She told me about a new potential client, a startup with huge growth potential. It was risky, but if we landed it, it could be bigger than all my old accounts combined. It's a long shot, she warned, but if anyone can do it, it's you. I felt a surge of determination. This was my chance to redefine myself, to show everyone, including myself, what I was truly capable of. As we headed back to our desks, Fiona nudged me. Oh, and there's a company mixer next week to woo some of these new clients. You should come. It'll be good for you to get out there. I hesitated. The thought of putting myself out there socially was daunting, but I knew she was right. It was time to step out of my comfort zone. Count me in, I said, surprising myself with my enthusiasm. That evening, as I recounted the day's events to my parents over dinner, I realized something. For the first time in years, I was excited about the future. There were challenges ahead, yes, but also opportunities, and I was ready to face them head on. I'm proud of you, sweetheart, my father said, his eyes misty. You're finding your strength again. I smiled, feeling a warmth spread through my chest. I am, Dad, and you know what? It feels pretty damn good. The company mixer buzzed with energy, a sea of unfamiliar faces and polite small talk. I smoothed my dress nervously, feeling out of place. Fiona had convinced me to wear something bolder than my usual attire, insisting it would boost my confidence. You've got this, Evie, Fiona whispered, squeezing my arm before disappearing into the crowd. I took a deep breath and made my way to the bar, determined to mingle and hopefully connect with potential clients. As I waited for my drink, a familiar voice cut through the noise. Evie? Evelyn Harper, is that you? I turned, my heart skipping a beat as I recognized the man approaching me. Preston? Preston Bowen? His warm smile hadn't changed since college. I can't believe it. How long has it been? Too long, I replied, surprised by the genuine joy I felt seeing him. We fell into easy conversation, catching up on the years that had passed. Preston was now a successful architect, his eyes lighting up as he talked about his latest projects. What about you, Evie? Still conquering the business world. I hesitated, unsure how to answer. It's complicated. I've had some setbacks recently. Preston's expression softened. I heard about your divorce. I'm so sorry. Something in his tone made me look up. There was no pity in his eyes, just genuine concern and something else I couldn't quite place. Evie, I've been thinking a lot about you, he said quietly. Before I could respond, a commotion near the entrance caught everyone's attention. My blood ran cold as I recognized the voice cutting through the murmur of the crowd. Where is she? Where's my wife? Devon stumbled into view, his eyes wild and unfocused. He'd clearly been drinking. Ex-wife, I muttered, my momentary happiness evaporating. Preston stepped closer, protectively. Do you want me to handle this? I shook my head, steeling myself. No, I need to do this myself. As I approached Devon, the crowd parted, all eyes on us. I could feel the weight of their stares, the whispers already starting. Devon, what are you doing here? I kept my voice low, trying to avoid a scene. He grabbed my arm, his grip painfully tight. I made a mistake, Evie. I want us back, he pleaded, his voice cracking. The smell of alcohol on his breath made me recoil. You're drunk, Devon. Go home. Not without you, he insisted, his voice rising. I was wrong. I need you. I felt a surge of anger, months of pain and resentment bubbling to the surface. Need me? You left me when I needed you most. You called me a burden. The room had gone silent, all pretense of polite disinterest abandoned as our private drama played out publicly. Devon's face crumpled. I'm sorry. Please, Evie, give me another chance. For a moment, a tiny part of me wavered. This was the man I'd loved, the life I'd known. But then I remembered the coldness in his eyes as he handed me those divorce papers, the years of feeling inadequate and unloved. No, I said, my voice stronger than I felt. We're done, Devon, for good. As security arrived to escort him out, I turned to find Preston watching me, a mix of concern and admiration on his face. Are you okay? He asked softly. I nodded, suddenly exhausted. I will be. As the party reluctantly resumed around us, Preston gently touched my arm. Let me take you home. We can talk if you want, or not. Whatever you need. I looked at him, really looked at him for the first time in years. I saw kindness, understanding, and something that looked a lot like love. It terrified me and thrilled me in equal measure. In that moment, I faced a choice. I could retreat, protect my battered heart from any possibility of future pain, or I could take a chance, open myself up to the potential for happiness again. Actually, I said, surprising myself, I'd love to get a coffee and talk, if you're free. Preston's smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. For you, Evie? Always. As we left the party together, I felt a glimmer of hope. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I was excited to see where it might lead. The weeks following the company mixer had been a whirlwind. Preston and I had been spending more time together, rekindling a connection I'd forgotten was possible. For the first time in years, I felt truly seen and appreciated. But as I stood outside my apartment building, staring at the unexpected visitors before me, that newfound happiness threatened to crumble. "Evelyn, dear, we need to talk," Miriam Caldwell said, her usually imperious tone softened with what sounded like genuine remorse. Beside her, Stanley looked uncomfortable, avoiding my gaze. My heart raced as I considered turning them away. But curiosity got the better of me. "Come in," I said curtly, leading them to my small living room. As we sat, an awkward silence fell. Finally, Stanley cleared his throat. "Evelyn, we owe you an apology." I blinked, certain I'd misheard. In all the years I'd known them, the Caldwells had never apologized for anything. Miriam leaned forward, her eyes glistening. "We were wrong about you, dear. The way we treated you, it was unforgivable." Their words, so long wished for, now felt hollow. Where was this remorse when I was fighting cancer, when their son abandoned me at my lowest? "Why now?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Stanley shifted uncomfortably. "Devon, he's in trouble. He's been drinking, lost his job. He needs help, and he needs you." And there it was, the real reason for their visit. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, surprised to find I meant it. "But I don't see how I can help." Miriam reached for my hand, which I instinctively pulled away. "You were always his rock, Evelyn. If anyone can bring him back, it's you." A bitter laugh escaped me. "His rock? He left me when I needed him most, called me a burden." "We know," Stanley said, his voice heavy with shame, "and we encouraged him. We were wrong, so wrong." As they continued their pleas, my mind raced. Part of me, the part that had spent years trying to please these people, wanted to help, but a stronger, wiser part knew better. Just then, my phone buzzed. A text from Preston. "Can't wait for dinner tonight. You make me happier than I've ever been." In that moment, everything crystallized. I stood, my decision made. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice firm. "I truly am. But I can't help you or Devon. That chapter of my life is closed." Miriam's face crumpled. "But he loves you. He made a mistake." "No," I cut her off. "He made a choice, and now I'm making mine." As I showed them out, a commotion in the hallway caught our attention. Devon stumbled towards us, clearly drunk. "Evie," he slurred, reaching for me. "I knew you'd take me back. We belong together." I stepped back, my heart pounding. "Devon, you need to leave." His face darkened. "Leave? I just got here. I'm not going anywhere without you." As he lunged forward, I felt a surge of panic, but before he could reach me, another figure appeared. "I believe the lady asked you to leave." Preston's steady voice cut through the tension. Devon's eyes narrowed. "Who the hell are you?" "Someone who actually cares about Evie," Preston replied, moving protectively in front of me. The situation was escalating rapidly. Devon, fueled by alcohol and jealousy, took a swing at Preston. In the chaos that followed, I found myself caught between my past and my potential future. As security arrived to handle Devon and his parents looked on in horror, I felt a strange sense of calm. This was the moment. The final break from my old life. Turning to Preston, I saw concern in his eyes. "Are you okay?" I took a deep breath, realizing I had a choice to make. I could let this incident drag me back into the drama and pain of my past, or I could embrace the future I'd been building. "I will be," I said, taking his hand. "Let's get out of here." As we walked away, leaving the echoes of my past behind, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, I was ready to face it on my own terms. The weeks following Devon's drunken outburst flew by in a whirlwind of change. Preston and I had grown closer, our relationship deepening with each passing day. His unwavering support and genuine affection were a balm to my battered heart. "Move in with me," Preston said one evening as we sat on my small balcony watching the sunset. You've come too far to look back now. I hesitated, old fears bubbling up. Are you sure? My life's been such a mess. His eyes serious. Evie, you're the strongest person I know. Your mess is part of what makes you amazing. His words touched something deep within me, and I found myself nodding. Okay, let's do it. The next few days were a flurry of packing and planning. As I sorted through my belongings, deciding what to keep and what to let go, it felt like I was shedding the last remnants of my old life. On moving day, as we carried the last box into Preston's, our apartment, my phone rang. It was Fiona, her voice tight with worry. Evie, you need to get to the office. Now. My stomach dropped. What's wrong? It's that big account you've been working on. Devon's here, and he's threatening to tank the deal if you don't talk to him. I felt the blood drain from my face. This account was my chance to prove myself, to reclaim my place in the company, and Devon knew it. Preston saw my expression and was immediately at my side. What is it? I explained quickly, my mind racing. I have to go, I said, grabbing my keys. I'm coming with you, Preston insisted, but I shook my head. No, I need to handle this myself, for good. The drive to the office was a blur. When I arrived, the tension in the air was palpable. I could hear Devon's raised voice before I even entered the conference room. There she is, he exclaimed as I walked in, his words slightly slurred. The woman of the hour. I took in the scene. My colleagues' uncomfortable faces, the client's confusion, and Devon's disheveled appearance. This was my moment of truth. Devon, we need to talk. Privately, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. He smirked. Anything you have to say, you can say in front of everyone. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. Fine, you need to leave. Now. What we had is over, and you have no right to interfere with my life or my work. Devon's face darkened. No right? I made you who you are. Without me, you're nothing. His words, once so cutting, now felt hollow. I looked around the room, at the faces of people who had supported me, believed in me. Then I turned back to Devon. You're wrong, I said, my voice growing stronger. I am everything I am in spite of you, not because of you, and I won't let you take that away from me. I turned to the clients, who were watching with a mix of shock and interest. I apologize for this disruption. If you'll give me a chance, I'd like to show you why our proposal is the best choice for your company. For a moment, the room was silent. Then, to my surprise, the lead client nodded. We're listening, Miss Harper. As I launched into my presentation, I felt a surge of confidence. Devon's protests faded into the background as I spoke passionately about the project, my ideas flowing effortlessly. When I finished, the clients were smiling. We're impressed, Miss Harper. You've got yourself a deal. The room erupted in applause. As security finally escorted a protesting Devon out, Fiona rushed to hug me. You did it, Evie. You really did it. In that moment, surrounded by the warmth of my colleagues' congratulations, I felt a profound shift. This wasn't just a professional victory. It was a personal one. I had faced my past, stood my ground, and come out stronger. As the excitement died down and I gathered my things to leave, I found myself both exhilarated and exhausted. The day's events had pushed me to my limits, forcing me to confront my deepest fears and insecurities. But as I stepped out of the office, I realized something profound. For the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of what came next. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I knew I had the strength to face them. My future was my own, and I was ready to embrace it fully. The soft glow of fairy lights illuminated our backyard, transforming it into a magical oasis. I stood before the full-length mirror in our bedroom, smoothing down my simple white dress. It wasn't the elaborate gown I'd worn for my first wedding, but it felt infinitely more me. A gentle knock at the door pulled me from my thoughts. Come in, I called. My mother, Henrietta, entered, her eyes immediately welling with tears. Oh, Evie, she breathed. You look beautiful. I smiled, feeling a lump form in my throat. Thanks, Mom. She approached, taking my hands in hers. This is what it's all about, Evie. Family, love, and new beginnings, she said, her voice thick with emotion. As we embraced, I felt the weight of the past few years lift from my shoulders. The pain, the struggles, the moments of despair, they had all led me here, to this moment of pure joy. Are you ready? My father asked, appearing at the doorway. I took a deep breath and nodded. More than ever. As we made our way to the backyard, I could hear the soft murmur of conversation from our small gathering of friends and family. This wasn't a grand affair, but it was perfect. The moment I stepped into view, I locked eyes with Preston. His face lit up with a smile so bright it rivaled the twinkling lights surrounding us. In that instant, I knew with absolute certainty that I was exactly where I was meant to be. As I walked down the makeshift aisle, memories of the past year flashed through my mind. The betrayal, the surgery, the long road to recovery, both physically and emotionally. But with each step, those painful memories faded, replaced by newer, happier ones. Preston's unwavering support, Fiona's friendship, my parents' love, and my own rediscovered strength. When I reached Preston, he took my hands in his eyes shining with unshed tears. "You're breathtaking," he whispered. As we exchanged vows, promising to love and support each other through whatever life might bring, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. This wasn't just a new chapter, it was a whole new book. The celebrant's voice rang out, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride." As Preston's lips met mine, cheers erupted from our guests. I could hear Fiona's enthusiastic whooping and my parents' joyful sobs. During the reception, as Preston and I swayed to our first dance, I caught sight of a familiar face at the edge of the yard. Devon stood there, looking lost and uncertain. Our eyes met for a brief moment, and I felt a flicker of something. Not regret or longing, but a quiet acknowledgement of our shared past and the vastly different paths we now walked. He nodded once, a silent gesture of, "What? Apology? Acceptance?" Then he turned and disappeared into the night. I tightened my arms around Preston, feeling grateful for the journey that had led me to this moment. "Thank you," I whispered. He pulled back slightly, his brow furrowed in confusion. "For what?" "For loving me, for seeing me when I couldn't see myself, for being patient while I found my way back to who I really am." Preston's eyes softened. "Evie, loving you is the easiest thing I've ever done. You're the strongest, most incredible person I know. I'm the lucky one here." As the night wore on, surrounded by the warmth of friends and family, I found myself reflecting on the incredible journey of the past year. I had faced my deepest fears, confronted my past, and emerged stronger than I ever thought possible. Looking around at the smiling faces of my loved ones, Fiona raising her glass in a toast, my parents beaming with pride, and Preston gazing at me with pure adoration, I realized that this was more than just a happy ending. It was a new beginning, full of promise and possibility. I had shattered the echoes of my past and built something beautiful from the pieces. Leaned to Preston's embrace, I knew that whatever challenges the future might hold, I was ready to face them, not as the woman I once was, but as the woman I had become. This was my story, my life, and for the first time in forever, I couldn't wait to see what the next chapter would bring. I couldn't believe my ears. As I mingled with relatives at the family reunion, I overheard Rick, my brother-in-law, snickering with his friends. "Once I get that idiot sister-in-law out of the way, the family business will be all ours." A sinking feeling gripped my stomach. Rick had always been arrogant, but I never imagined he harbored such malicious intentions against me. I glanced across the room at my husband, Alan, laughing with his parents, oblivious to the venom spewing from his own brother's mouth. Later that evening, as Alan and I tucked our son, Oliver, into bed, I found myself at a loss for words. How could I shatter the illusion of our perfect family? Oliver's innocent eyes brimmed with love, and I couldn't bring myself to burden his young mind with the harsh reality. In the days that followed, I noticed subtle shifts in Alan's behavior. He grew more distant, often lost in thought, and our once effortless conversations became strained. I couldn't help but wonder if Rick had already planted seeds of doubt about me. One night, Alan broke the news that shook me to my core. "My parents think it's a good idea to invest in Rick's new venture. He's got a solid business plan, and they believe it could be a game changer for the family." I tried to reason with him, expressing my concerns about Rick's motives, but my words seemed to fall on deaf ears. Alan's unwavering trust in his family blinded him to the potential consequences of such a risky investment. As the weeks passed, the strain between us intensified. Oliver, ever perceptive, picked up on the tension, his usual cheerful demeanor replaced by a somber silence. I couldn't bear to see my once happy family crumbling before my eyes. Desperate for answers, I confided in my closest friend, Samantha. Her unwavering support and objective perspective provided the clarity I needed. Together, we began gathering evidence of Rick's past misdeeds, slowly unraveling the web of lies he had carefully constructed. With each damning piece of information we uncovered, my resolve grew stronger. I knew I had to confront Rick, to expose his true nature before he succeeded in tearing my family apart. The stakes were higher than I could have ever imagined. But I was determined to fight for the truth, no matter the cost. In the following weeks, Rick's influence over my in-laws grew stronger. He painted me as a manipulative outsider, hell-bent on undermining the family's legacy. With each conversation, his poisonous words eroded their trust in me. "Marla's been filling your head with nonsense," Rick said during one of his frequent visits. "She's threatened by my success and is trying to sabotage the business deal." Alan's parents nodded solemnly, their expressions a mixture of concern and doubt. It broke my heart to see the once unshakable bond within our family fracturing. At home, the situation deteriorated rapidly. Alan, swayed by Rick's persuasive lies, became increasingly distant and argumentative. "Why can't you just support me on this?" he snapped one evening, after I voiced my reservations about the investment. "It's a fantastic opportunity, and you're letting your personal issues with Rick cloud your judgment." I recoiled at the harshness of his words, feeling helpless in the face of Rick's insidious machinations. Oliver, ever the sensitive child, retreated into himself, sensing the tension that permeated our once happy household. I ached to shield him from the turmoil, but the cracks in our family's foundation were becoming too prominent to ignore. "Dad's been acting weird lately." Oliver confided in me one night as I tucked him into bed. "Is everything okay?" I forced a reassuring smile, stroking his hair gently. "Don't worry, sweetheart. Everything will be all right." Even as the words left my lips, I felt the weight of uncertainty pressing down on me. How could I mend what Rick had so skillfully torn apart? Desperate for a glimmer of hope, I clung to the evidence Samantha and I had gathered, determined to expose Rick's deceitful ways. But with each passing day, the task seemed more daunting, as his lies enveloped my family like a suffocating shroud. One evening, as Alan and I sat in stony silence over dinner, he dropped a bombshell that shattered what little remained of my optimism. "I've decided to go ahead with the investment," he stated flatly, avoiding my gaze. "Rick has assured me it's a solid opportunity, and my parents are fully on board." My heart sank as I realized the extent of Rick's manipulation. He had successfully driven a wedge between Alan and me, exploiting my husband's loyalty to his family for his own nefarious gains. "Alan, please," I pleaded, my voice trembling with emotion. "Can't you see what he's doing? He's using you, using all of us for his own benefit." But my words fell on deaf ears. Alan had made up his mind, and Rick's influence had taken root too deeply. As I lay awake that night, the weight of the situation bearing down on me, I knew I had to act decisively. Rick's treachery could no longer be tolerated. I would expose him, no matter the cost, and reclaim the family he had so callously sought to destroy. With Samantha's unwavering support, I doubled down on my efforts to expose Rick's true nature. We pored over financial records, scoured through emails, and followed every lead, no matter how small. Our diligence paid off when we uncovered evidence of Rick's embezzlement from the family business. Invoices for non-existent expenses, suspicious wire transfers, it was all there, meticulously documented, painting a damning picture of his greed and deceit. Armed with this newfound knowledge, I confronted Alan, determined to make him see the truth. "Rick has been stealing from the company," I stated bluntly, spreading the evidence across the kitchen table. "He's been siphoning funds for his own gain, and now he's trying to drag us all down with this bogus investment." Alan's brow furrowed as he examined the documents, his expression a mixture of confusion and disbelief. "This can't be right," he muttered, shaking his head. "Rick would never do something like this." I could see the internal struggle playing out on his face, the desire to trust his brother-in-law warring with the mounting evidence of betrayal. "Open your eyes, Alan," I pleaded, my frustration mounting. "He's been manipulating you, all of us, from the start. This is just the tip of the iceberg." For a moment, I thought I had finally gotten through to him. Alan's gaze met mine, a flicker of doubt crossing his features. But then, as if a switch had been flipped, his expression hardened. This is just another one of your schemes, he spat, pushing the documents away. You're so desperate to turn me against my own family that you'd resort to fabricating evidence. His words stung like a physical blow, and I recoiled at the venom in his tone. How could he still be so blind to Rick's machinations? In the days that followed, the tension in our household was palpable. Alan and I barely spoke, our interactions reduced to terse exchanges and icy glares. Oliver, sensing the rift between us, retreated further into himself, his usual cheerful demeanor replaced by a somber silence that broke my heart. It was during one of these strained silences that I noticed a flicker of doubt cross Alan's face. He had been studying the investment paperwork, his brow furrowed in concentration, when suddenly his eyes narrowed. "Something's not adding up," he murmured, more to himself than to me. Seizing the opportunity, I approached him cautiously, pointing out the discrepancies I had noticed. The inflated projections, the questionable financial backing, the inconsistencies in Rick's pitch. For the first time, I saw the scales begin to tip in my favor. Alan's unwavering faith in his brother-in-law wavered as the evidence mounted, and the cracks in Rick's carefully constructed facade started to show. The arguments that followed were intense, with tempers flaring and voices raised. But through it all, I clung to the hope that Alan was finally seeing the truth, that the person he had trusted implicitly was nothing more than a master manipulator driven by greed and selfishness. As the dust settled, a newfound determination took root within me. Rick's deceit would no longer be tolerated, and I would stop at nothing to expose him, even if it meant risking the fragile bonds that remained within our fractured family. The next family gathering was a tense affair, with undercurrents of mistrust and animosity simmering beneath the surface. I could feel Rick's eyes boring into me, his smug expression a silent challenge. Mustering my courage, I approached him as he mingled with his cronies, the evidence of his misdeeds clutched tightly in my hand. "We need to talk," I stated firmly, my voice carrying across the room. Rick's eyes narrowed, but he quickly plastered on a false smile. "Of course, dear sister-in-law. What seems to be the problem?" I handed him the stack of documents, my hand trembling slightly with a mixture of nerves and anticipation. "These are records of your embezzlement from the family business," I stated, my voice unwavering. "Proof of your lies and deceit." A hush fell over the room as heads turned in our direction, the weight of my accusation hanging heavy in the air. For a moment, Rick's composure faltered, his eyes widening ever so slightly, but he quickly regained his footing, letting out a dismissive chuckle. "Really, Marla? Falsifying documents now?" He shook his head, his gaze sweeping across the gathered family members. "This is just another one of her pathetic attempts to undermine me." I opened my mouth to protest, but Rick cut me off, his voice dripping with contempt. "Don't think I don't know what you're up to," he sneered, taking a step closer. "You're threatened by my success, by the respect I've earned within this family. So you resort to these petty tactics, trying to turn everyone against me." My hands clenched into fists at my sides as Rick's words washed over me, each syllable dripping with venom. I could see the doubt flickering in the eyes of my relatives, their allegiances wavering. Alan stepped forward, his expression unreadable. "Marla, is this true? Have you been fabricating evidence?" The weight of his question hung in the air, and I felt the eyes of the entire room upon me. In that moment, I realized the enormity of what was at stake, not just the exposure of Rick's deceit, but the very fabric of our family's trust. Swallowing hard, I met Alan's gaze. "No," I stated firmly. "Every document, every piece of evidence is legitimate. I would never stoop to such levels." Rick scoffed, but I pressed on, my voice gaining strength with each word. "Look at the records, Alan. Look at the wire transfers, the bogus invoices. It's all there, plain as day. Rick has been stealing from the business, from our family, for years." A heavy silence blanketed the room as my words sank in, the weight of the accusation hanging thick in the air. I could see the conflict playing out on Alan's face, the struggle between his loyalty to his brother-in-law and the nagging doubts that had taken root. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he spoke. "I need proof," he said, his voice low and measured. "Concrete, irrefutable proof of what you're claiming." A surge of determination coursed through me. If proof was what he needed, then proof I would give him. "You'll have it," I promised, my gaze unwavering. And when you do, you'll see Rick for the liar and manipulator he truly is. As the gathering dispersed, the tension lingering in the air, I knew that the battle lines had been drawn. It was time to take the gloves off and fight for the truth, no matter the cost. The tension in the air was palpable as the family gathered for the emergency meeting. Accusations had been hurled, loyalties tested, and the once solid foundation of our clan had started to crumble. Rick strode into the room, his cocky demeanor a stark contrast to the somber expressions of the others. He shot me a smug glance, as if taunting me to make my next move. Alan cleared his throat, his expression grave. "We're here to address the allegations made against Rick." I could feel every eye on me as I rose from my seat, clutching the recording device in my trembling hand. This was it, the moment of truth. "I have proof," I announced, my voice steady despite the hammering of my heart. Proof of Rick's deceit and his intentions to undermine this family for his own gain. Rick scoffed, but I pressed on, hitting the play button on the recorder. His voice, smug and self-assured, filled the room. "Once I get that idiot sister-in-law out of the way, the family business will be all ours." A collective gasp rippled through the room as the damning words echoed off the walls. I watched as the color drained from Rick's face, his mask of arrogance slipping away. That's not what it sounds like," he stammered, his eyes darting around the room in desperation. But the recording played on, each sentence a nail in the coffin of his lies. Been siphoning funds for years. Bogus investment turned the family against her. By the time the recording ended, the room was deathly silent, the weight of the truth hanging heavy in the air. All eyes were fixed on Rick, the once untouchable golden boy now exposed as a fraud and a manipulator. Alan's expression was one of utter disbelief, a mixture of anger and hurt etched onto his features. "How could you?" he whispered, his voice hoarse with emotion. Rick opened his mouth, no doubt to spew forth more lies, but Alan held up a hand, silencing him. "No more," he said, his voice trembling with barely contained rage. "You've done enough damage." In that moment, it was as if the scales had fallen from everyone's eyes. The web of deceit that Rick had so carefully woven was unraveling before our very eyes, and the true depths of his betrayal were laid bare. One by one, family members rose to their feet, their expressions a mixture of disgust and outrage. Even Rick's most ardent supporters couldn't deny the damning evidence. "You're finished," Alan's father spat, his face twisted with anger. "Get out of my sight and never show your face here again." Rick's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, his once smug demeanor reduced to a pathetic display of stammering and denial. As he was unceremoniously escorted from the room, his protests falling on deaf ears, I felt a sense of vindication wash over me. The battle had been long and hard fought, but in the end, the truth had prevailed. Yet even as I basked in the victory, a pang of sadness tugged at my heart. This was my family, fractured and torn apart by the very person who should have been its strongest ally. The road to healing would be long and arduous, but I knew we would walk it together, stronger and wiser for the trials we had endured. As the dust settled and the adrenaline began to fade, I turned to Alan, our eyes meeting in a silent exchange of understanding and shared relief. The worst was over, but the real work was just beginning. In the aftermath of Rick's stunning downfall, the family was in turmoil. Loyalties were divided, with some still clinging to the belief that he had been wronged, while others rallied around Alan and me, determined to excise the cancer that had festered within our ranks. Rick, however, was not one to go down without a fight. Bitter and vengeful, he launched a campaign of lies and manipulation, attempting to turn the tide of opinion back in his favor. "She's been plotting this from the start," he hissed to anyone who would listen. "Marla's always been jealous of my success, and she saw an opportunity to take me down." His words were like poison, seeping into the minds of the more gullible family members, sowing seeds of doubt and mistrust. But I was no longer the meek, passive woman he had once dismissed. With Alan's unwavering support and the weight of the truth on my side, I pushed back against Rick's slander, countering his lies with irrefutable evidence and heartfelt pleas. "Look at the facts," I implored our relatives, laying out the paper trail of Rick's misdeeds. "He's the one who betrayed us, who put his own greed above the family's well-being." It was an uphill battle, but slowly, the tide began to turn. Those who had once been swayed by Rick's silver tongue saw the truth for what it was, and their allegiance shifted back to the family's side. Still, Rick remained defiant, his desperation mounting with each blow to his crumbling facade. It was during one of these tense standoffs that he crossed a line, threatening me with veiled implications of violence. "You'll regret this," he snarled, his face twisted with rage. "No one crosses me and gets away with it." I stood my ground, refusing to be intimidated by his hollow threats. But Alan, ever the protector, would not let such an affront go unanswered. In a blur of motion, he lunged forward, grabbing Rick by the collar and slamming him against the wall. "Don't you ever threaten her again," he growled, his face inches from Rick's. "Or I swear, I'll make you regret the day you were born." The raw fury in Alan's voice sent a chill down my spine, but I couldn't deny the swell of pride and love I felt in that moment. This was the man I had married, strong, loyal, and fiercely protective of those he loved. Rick, for once, was rendered speechless, his bravado crumbling in the face of Alan's righteous anger. It was a pivotal moment, a symbolic shifting of power that left no doubt as to who held the moral high ground. As Alan released his grip, Rick slunk away, his tail firmly between his legs. It was a humiliating defeat, witnessed by those who had once revered him as the golden child. In the days that followed, the family rallied around us, offering their support and condemnation of Rick's actions. The once fractured clan was slowly mending, united in their determination to move forward and leave the toxic legacy of betrayal behind. Yet, even as the dust settled and a sense of normalcy began to return, I couldn't shake the feeling that Rick's story was not yet over. He was a cornered animal, backed into a corner of his own making, and I knew from experience that such creatures were capable of lashing out with desperate, unpredictable fury. But I was no longer afraid. With Alan by my side and the truth as our shield, we were ready to face whatever Rick threw our way. The battle may have been won, but the war was far from over. With Rick's deceit exposed and his influence over the family shattered, Alan and I turned our focus to restoring order and trust within the business. It was a daunting task, made all the more challenging by the lingering doubts and divisions that Rick's machinations had sown. We pored over financial records, untangling the web of lies and cover-ups that had been woven over the years. Each discrepancy, each hidden transaction, was like a dagger to the heart, a stark reminder of the depth of Rick's betrayal. As the true extent of the damage became clear, Alan's parents struggled with a deep sense of guilt and shame. How could they have been so blind to the deceit unfolding right under their noses? "We trusted him implicitly," Alan's mother confessed, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. "He was family, and we never imagined he could be capable of such treachery." It was a sentiment echoed by many, a collective reckoning with the harsh reality that even those closest to us can harbor the darkest of intentions. But through it all, Alan and I remained steadfast in our resolve to rebuild what had been torn asunder. We held meetings, both formal and informal, to address the lingering concerns and doubts that had taken root. With patience and understanding, we listened to the grievances of those who had been swayed by Rick's lies, offering reassurance and a path forward. It was a slow and often frustrating process, but gradually the cracks began to mend. Trust, once shattered, was painstakingly rebuilt, one honest conversation at a time. As the business stabilized, we turned our attention to the legal ramifications of Rick's actions. With the evidence we had gathered, the authorities had no choice but to pursue charges for embezzlement and fraud. The day Rick was taken into custody, a hush fell over the family. There was no joy, no sense of triumph, only a profound sadness that it had come to this. Family bonds, once cherished, had been irreparably severed by greed and deceit. In the aftermath, we sought solace in professional counseling, recognizing the need for outside guidance to navigate the complex emotions and trauma we had endured. It was a humbling experience, but one that ultimately brought us closer together as a family. During one particularly poignant session, Alan's father broke down, his stoic facade crumbling as he confronted the depth of his own culpability. "I should have seen it," he choked out, his voice thick with emotion. "I should have protected you all from his poisonous influence." In that moment, I felt a profound sense of empathy wash over me. For all the pain and turmoil Rick had caused, he was still a part of this family, and his actions had left wounds that would take time and care to heal. As the weeks turned to months, a sense of normalcy began to return, tempered by a newfound appreciation for the bonds that had been tested and ultimately strengthened. Alan and I found ourselves drawing closer than ever, united in our shared triumph over adversity. It was during this period of healing and growth that we made the decision to renew our vows, a symbolic gesture of our unwavering commitment to one another and to the family we had fought so hard to protect. As I stood before Alan, surrounded by the loved ones who had weathered the storm alongside us, I felt a profound sense of gratitude and hope. The road had been long and arduous, but we had emerged from the crucible of betrayal stronger, wiser, and more united than ever before. In the months following our vow renewal, the family business began to thrive once more, the dark cloud of Rick's deceit finally lifting. With honesty and transparency at the helm, we regained the trust of our partners and clients, and the company's reputation was restored. Yet, even as we celebrated our professional successes, there was a deeper, more personal victory that filled me with a profound sense of gratitude. The strength of our family bonds forged anew in the crucible of adversity. Gone were the days of whispered secrets and veiled accusations. In their place was a newfound openness, a commitment to communication and understanding that had been sorely lacking before. I would often catch Alan's parents sharing a knowing glance, their eyes shining with a mix of pride and relief. They had come perilously close to losing everything they held dear, and the lessons learned had left an indelible mark. "We're lucky to have you, Marla," Alan's mother confided one evening as we sipped tea on the patio. "If it weren't for your strength and perseverance, who knows where we'd be right now?" Her words, spoken with such sincerity, brought tears to my eyes. For so long, I had felt like an outsider, forever seeking acceptance and validation within this family. Now, at last, I felt truly seen and valued for who I was. Oliver, too, seemed to blossom in the newfound atmosphere of trust and stability. Gone was the somber, withdrawn child who had borne witness to the family's turmoil. In his place was a vibrant, confident young man, secure in the knowledge that the bonds that held us together were unbreakable. "I'm proud of you, Mom," he whispered one night as I tucked him into bed, his eyes shining with admiration. "You never gave up, even when things looked really bad." In that moment, I felt a surge of pride and love so intense, it threatened to overwhelm me. Through it all, the lies, the betrayal, the darkest moments when hope seemed lost, Oliver had been my guiding light, my unwavering reminder of what truly mattered. As the days turned to weeks and the weeks to months, our family settled into a new normal, one built on the hard-won lessons of the past. There were still moments of tension, of course, as old wounds took time to fully heal, but we faced them head-on, with open hearts and a willingness to truly listen and understand one another. And through it all, Alan remained my steadfast partner, my rock in the storm. His unwavering love and support had been the bedrock upon which our family's redemption was built, and I found myself falling deeper in love with him with each passing day. It was on a warm summer evening, as we sat side by side on the porch swing, watching Oliver chase fireflies in the twilight, that I felt a profound sense of peace wash over me. The battles had been fought, the demons laid to rest, and we had emerged victorious, our bond stronger than ever before. "Can you believe how far we've come?" I murmured, leaning my head against Alan's shoulder. He smiled, his eyes filled with a mix of joy and hard-won wisdom. It wasn't an easy road, but it was worth every step. And in that moment, as the fireflies danced around us like tiny beacons of hope, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together. A family united, resilient, and unbreakable.